let's begin. It's going to be a little bit difficult because we're going to try to start from the beginning, even though we're sort of towards the end. So it's a little bit all over the place. But b'siyata d'shmaya, we're going to try our best. What I would like to get through at the very least is, just to give you a little bit of an outline, is we're going to start from the top, which is obviously the Chi of Tevilah. We're then going to go through the materials in the Chi of Tevilah, and then we're going to go into disposable pans. That hopefully will be the big bulk of what we like to say today. And then we'll see how much time we have to continue into other areas. So, of course, we know that the Chi of Tevilah is learnt out from Kli Midyan in Parshas Matos, quoted in the Gemara of Udazara, Daf Ayin Hamid Beis, Kol asher yavai be'esh tavir be'esh v'taher. Haisavcha Taira Cheres. And basically, here begins the $1 million question, is that what is considered Klei Achila? What is considered Klei Achila as somehow, whatever is Taviru Be'esh, we all know the Pri Chadash is Kasha, where in the world does that tell us that it's Klei Achila? But that's, what everything boils down to, and throughout the whole sugya, throughout all the items, it's for sure not a Klei Achila, it's for sure, Klei Achila. But to quantify that is going to be the $1 million question. Can you give me some liquid, please? Thank you so much. So now, before we even get into the materials, to make a very long story, people spend a long time figuring out, is it Derais, is it Rabbanan, all the Rishayim, Rambam, V'chulu. L'maisa, we'll start with the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan, thank you very much, I appreciate it. The Aruch HaShulchan, L'chaira, is the Pashtus. So let's not say the Pashtus, because then someone has to argue and say that it's not Pashtus. So let's just say the Aruch HaShulchan, to keep things nice and easy. In Sif Dalet, he says it again in Sif Chaf Aleph. The Aruch HaShulchan, in discussing the Chi of Tevilah, says, as I guess one would think, when you see that it's a pasuk in the Torah, so you assume it's a deraisa, and that's really how Kemat. Again, is it Roiv? Is it Kolab Rishainim? Again, let's not get bogged down. But Lamaisa, we'll just read his words. Kol Rabbeinu Eskimu de Tevilah Zuhi Min HaTorah. Period. So now, when you finish saying that statement, everyone jumps. Says, what about the Rambam? What about the Rambam in Ochos Machos Asur of Perek Yuzayin Halacha Hey, that the Rambam says, Einoi Ella Midivrei Seifrim. And he quotes the Gemara, that the Gemara says, Amru Chachamim Haisif Lo Taira Cheretz. So everyone wants to know, wait, does the Rambam mean it's the Rabbanan? So says the Aruch HaShulchan, V'yesh shekasu de Rambam, Sirlei du de Rabbanan. He says that's how the Rashba learns the Rambam. Says Aruch HaShulchan, when you read the Rambam, sounds that way. The Midivrei Seifrim. Omnam, however, the way I explain it, it's good. So the Rambam here, the Aruch HaShulchan, gives a little limud how we learn psukim. That if the pasuk itself leads to a drasha, then it's pashat. But here the pasuk itself doesn't necessarily lead to this drasha. So says the Aruch HaShulchan, El derabanan kiblu zal pi hashmua behechrech dolmayri kan betoma v'tayra ulefi zeh havim yutar hach v'tir lachein kari lei midivrei seifrim. Therefore, we call it a divrei seifrim, but of course it's daraisa. K'moshe kari kedushay kesef midivrei seifrim. Avshu min hatayra. Anyone learning Daf Yomi right now, right? I mean, it's been almost a month since we got to the kinyan, from the kinyan, but I think we've all learned the Gemara in Kedushin Daf Beis that Isha Niknis begimel derachim. What are the gimel derachim? Kesef shtar and bia. What is kesef? Kichachichem stayafraim. And over there it says similar that it's divrei seifrim. What do you mean it's divrei seifrim? The Rambam says so. Elamai must be. As the Rambam himself, he proves his point. The Aruch HaShulchan, the Rambam himself, of course, it's a deraisa, and therefore halacha lemaisa, Tevilas Keilim is a deoraisa. Where is it a deraisa? Let's just keep it to where we know in the Gemara. Where do we know in the Gemara? We know, we'll see in a moment, it's going to be the sheish matachis, the 6 metals, plus 1. What's the plus 1? Plus glass. Why? We'll see that in one second. Now the fact that it is a daraisa, as glass might not be daraisa, but glass has a vadei chiyuv. What glass can be? I'm going to get to glass in one moment. I don't want to make a comment in glass. We're going to get to glass in 1 second. Baruch atah. No, I don't have to make a bracha. That sounded weird. we're in middle of our bracha. Shigla Pikarsis. Okay. So that is the Rambam. That is the Psak Halacha, and it's a Daraisa. Before we get to glass, what's the nafkamina? If it's Daraisa, Darabanan. So the first nafkamina is that. Seemed like someone was at the door. Okay. The first nafkamina is that, as you see all over, Daraisas, you have Safik Daraisa, you have Safik Darabanan. But what's the largest nafkamina between Daraisa and Darabanan? No. Also, by the way, there's a Mishnah Brura. The Mishnah Brura, in case you want another Maramakim, the Mishnah Brura in Shin Chav Gimel, Sivkat Lamed Aleph, Shin Chav Gimel is where we're discussing Tevilas Keilim on Shabbos. So the Mishnah Brura over there says that the Mashma Dafilu Kli Mateches Daharbe Paiskin Sirle de Tevilasai Hu Minat Taira. Says Harbe Paiskim. It says Harbe Paiskim. That's the lashon of the Mishnah Brura. The Aruch HaShulchan, as we just read, says Askamas Kol HaPaiskim. Lamaisa, the Bir Halacha over there in Shin Chav Gimel says Al Kopanim Einoi Oichel Iser V'gam Inis Zek Ki Im Midrabon Afilu Das HaSayvrim Dat Filahu Min HaTayra. So the Bir Halacha also seems to lend some credence that that there are those who hold it's not Daraisa, but okay, Lamaisa is the simplest way of learning it is, as we said, from the Aruch HaShulchan. What is the big nafkamina? No? Safik, what else? Very big nafkamina. Nafkamina is going to be in Nemanis. Nemanis. What's going to be the shayla of Nemanis? Okay, that's going to be one case. Give us maybe an easier case. Easier case. You guys didn't get to Sif Yudal yet, so look at Sif Yudalid. Good. Look at Sif Yudalid. It says Sif Yudalid. It says Sif Yudalid. Ein ma'aminim. Katan al Tevilas Keilim. It says the Ramah. Aval and Tavle lefnei gadol have tefillah. But if you travel in front of the gadol. Now, just to speak out, you all learned Hilchos Nida, so you already know this din. What's the halacha if I watch a kli fall into the mikvah? Taif. Now this is very important, and that's why the Shulchan Aruch here says ein ma'aminim. That's why the Shulchan Aruch here says ein ma. Someone argues? No. As the Shulchan Aruch says ein ma'aminim, you don't believe. Avalim tovle if they God tefillah. Now I want to mention this is from Ma'aseh Shaya that happened very recently. Personal Ma'aseh Shaya. You always have to be careful. Sometimes you learn one halacha and you're like, yeah, okay, I'll quickly, midam milsa milsa. And apply A to B, and no big deal. And you might find out that you're just a complete bumbling fool. Why are you a fool? Because you might not. You have to understand where things come from, right? So why here could a katan work? So we understand the reason. It's because it's not a problem in the ma'isa mitzvahs tevilah. In the dunking it in. That's not the problem. The problem is in the manas. Therefore, that's what the Ramah says. That if the katan taivaled it in front of an adam gadol, it's going to work. Clearly, the issue is not in the Maisa. What is this laf? Okay, this.
The other thing is a lesson of Tevilah Gadol, which is like you need the das of the because you don't need it.
Meaning, good. That's also true. It's also true. In Hilchos Chala, this is a pretty common case. I don't know why it's not brought down in all the kids' farm, and I don't know why it's not in my own. I had a question on myself last night, and I was very upset. But okay, listen, I guess that's what Mahadura Shaniya is that can a child take off challah? Can a child take off challah? Someone recently sent me a message, and he said, "Is this normal?" I just came out of a pizza store, and as I was walking out, one of the Mexican workers said to me, "Wait, can you help me for a minute?" And I said, "Okay, what do you need?" He says, "Can you come with me?" I said, "Okay, I'm being kidnapped." No, he brought him to the back of the store, and he asked him if he could take off challah. So he took off challah. The kid actually asked me, someone's at the door, I think. Kid actually asked me, just open up for him. Kid actually asked me if, he wanted to know about the bracha on it. Okay, and thank you so much. The kid actually asked if you need to make a bracha. Fine. And then he asked me, is that like a normal thing? So I asked him, was it a good hechsher, etc. But he said on the wall there was a sign. There was a sign that whoever took off challah had a sign. So I guess that's how the kashrus stays on top of making sure. They know how many batches of dough were made a day. If it equals up with the amount of signatures, then you're good. Now, probably there was supposed to be a mashgiach there to do it. Chayra, the mashgiach took a little too long at mincha, and they needed someone to do it. But that's a good checks and balances. It's just sometimes, I don't know if it's the most lechatchila, because what if he didn't? But the answer, if he didn't, then they would have gotten into serious trouble. So now, can you have a child take off challah? Can you have a child? But by the way, you see that sometimes such a simple eitzah could save the whole kashrus. And that's the reason why if you walk into a pizza store, maybe not in this country, and pizza stores take off challah very quickly because you hopefully, if not, you're not such a successful pizza store. And if they don't have a firm worker and they don't have a sign taking off challah, so who took off challah? There's no either. Very good. And therefore you're allowed to eat that food? Therefore it's not kosher. But now what's very interesting is, so I'm just going to speak out a misconception one can make. Tevilas Keilim is daraisa. We seeing over here, could a katan do it? Yeah, as long as I'm watching the katan. Hilchas hafrashas challah is the Rabbana, even in Eretz Yisrael, because we don't have Rav Yid in Eretz Yisrael. There's a suffix nowadays, maybe Ulayev, sure we're getting close to the level of Daraisa, but the Pasha is the Rabbanan. Someone says it's the Rabbanan. Of course, you could have a kid do it. And if you watch the kid do it, L'chaira, it should for sure work. Lehalacha, it seems to not be the case. I say seems because I'll be honest, I just could not find someone that discussed this explicitly. But they all say a katan can't do it. But the rayas they bring is from Mishnah and Trumas. So it's not such a raya because it's the rice, right? Okay, but the reasoning, which is why we went on this lengthy digression, which anyways I thought you find it interesting, so we get something new on the table, is that by challah there's something called a maisa hafrasha. The maisa hafrasha. A child can't do a maisa hafrasha. I don't care if I watch the child all day and night. A child can't do maisa hafrasha. That's why in Hilchas Challah it says, but if it's a katan that's mufla, a katan that's a smart katan, that maybe has das to understand what to do. So they discuss maybe 11 or a 12-year-old would be able to do it. That's because his das maybe allows him to do the maisa safrasha of a mitzvah before he has a din of a gadol. Great. What do you see from the whole shmuz? You see, it's not a din of net manis. It's not that I'm watching you do it. Similar, can a guy take off challah? The answer is no. Why not? For the same reason. It's a ma'aseh mitzvah. Could a guy Tevilas Keilim? The answer is absolutely yes. However, he can't. Why can't he? Because he has no net manis. Good. Oh, very good. So now let's come back to us. Thank you very much. So Tevilas Keilim is a deraisa. On the deraisa, can we believe a child? The answer is absolutely not. Where do we see that? It's a Sefer Shulchan Aruch. Let's not go look for like the rayas. It's a Sefer Shulchan Aruch. Sefer Yudalit. Sometimes we have to, yeah. So Sefer Yudalit, that a child can't do it. But if a gadol emet al gabav, then he could do it. Why? Because you see him do it. But now let's go practical. Okay. Tachlis is you want to send your kid to the mikveh to Tevilas Keilim. So how do you do it? You don't have gadol emet al gabav because you're not there. So now the paiskim, the chachani. 1 second. I know people get upset when I don't give Ma'ar Mekaymis. The Chachani over here in Hilchas Tevilas Keilim, in the end of Sivkat Chav Dalet, it's on page 54, says, you know what you do? We need just have a nemanis. How do you get nemanis? We don't have nemanis. You don't need, this might even work nemanis for anything. Well, so what do you do, Nu? Someone give me an eitzah. Okay, but let's go Chachani. What was he saying? Polaroid. No. Well, Polaroids are back in style, though. What was he saying? What do you do? It says a chachani. Very simple. Give the kid a piece of paper. Tell the kid if there's an adult, make sure an adult watches you tevel it. Signs on a paper that you teveled it. Very simple eights, and that for sure works. That works. But now the problem now is, very good. So l'chayra, I say l'chayra because this wasn't discussed because the children certainly shouldn't be having the smartphone to take the selfie. But let's just be practical for a moment. What if the kid does? Or could he borrow someone's phone? Can he go on FaceTime and have you watch him tevel it? Very simply, could he send the person there? Send my mommy a message. Something. The pashtus is, it all works. It all works because this is just verifying, it's a bearer that it was tevel. Now the place can do discuss is the fact that it's wet. enough, and that's one. See. How do you know they did a good tefillah? Okay, so the answer is, I mean, it's not that hard to do a good tefillah, but if it is, ain't a you're right. So the gadol is watching. Again. So you're right. If you're sending, you're pointing out is a good point. You're sending a fork, no big deal. And let's go into the world of no big deal. We'll get to eventually, I hope, is that even if he's holding on and even if he doesn't let go and all the issues he might have, Lamaisa b'diavad, we all know it's all going to work. Was he squeezing the taillights out of the thing? Yeah, I mean, if he is, then you should work on your chinuch that you shouldn't beat him up if he comes back, and then he won't squeeze the taillights out of the fork and weiter. Or tell him to use the basket. Thank you. But you're right. If you send him with a thin, open bottle of wine decanter, which is not the simplest thing to tevel, as we saw. Okay, we know the eitz you fill up with water first, and it's that. Then ein chanami. You are correct. The fact that maybe now coming back wet also pashas wouldn't necessarily help because maybe the kid got lazy, rinsed it in the sink, and brought it back home. But that is the reason why it is important to know that it is a din de'oraisa. Beautiful. Next. What are you doing with Tevilas Keilim? Again, we spoke out these points. Again, I'll try not to apologize at every juncture, although my nature is to do that, which I tell you. What are you doing with Tevilas Keilim? You are, as Yerushalmi and Avodah Zarah Parakei Allah Lam says, Tazvav says, excuse me, yeah?
If it was a Rabbanan, then a katan would be, why does that matter?
If it's a Rabbanan, there would be more makom for a nemanis of a katan. Now, your question really is, you could have nemanis on Rabbanan, not on Teraisis. What does that mean? I don't understand what the question is. But if you look at the Taz, again, you have to see Yudalid. I don't fully want to discuss this because when you look at Yudalid, the Taz over there says, oh, okay. So then again, we're not going to go. Says Rav Kiva Eger. Lefi say nearly he is that did because chuchas man bin on the katan the klich chuchas kliyama tefillah rak the banik which because of pre chadash v'chein because of shagizari v'chein because of Jewish panamirais, which answers your question, Ramesha. You asked before what's glass. We see that called gedali apais we're saying it's Rabbanan. V'ulan v'y match because of taisis and ervin the dafka dav shalom to Rami Alayu mem the katan Rabbanan. Maybe the nemanis of a katan is only something that they know about. Aval b'shlichas loya ein sham imkein achadem shal katan l'tvok l'tichud sham te'eno neman. Okay, so the Rav Kiva Eger is not so happy that the Taz seems to say that under Rabbanan's will work. Again, whether it will or whether it won't, we will get back to when we get to Yud Dalid. If you want to know a psak lahalacha on a derabanan, what's the answer going to be? Yesh makom lahakal. We'll say it like that. You see, with Rav Kiva Eger, it's not so pashut. I still wouldn't say it's l'chatchila, but again, we'll get to Yadalit. I was just bringing out what you see from the Derais. And if you were listening to Rav Kiva Eger, he was saying it could be a chalik in the world of shlichos to katan, whether it's world of nemanis. Okay, we'll get there. B'siyata dishmai. What are you doing when you toivel a kli? Says the Yerushalmi, you are taking it out from Tomas Nachri v'nechnasoi lekedushas Yisrael. The Beis Yosef quoted this Yerushalmi, and the question that everyone wonders, and Ramesha articulates in Chelik Gimel Simin Chaf Aleph, that what in the world does that mean? Because there's nothing to do with din of Tama. We're all Tame. Pardon the Kahanim in the room. We're all Tame. So all of a sudden you touch the Keilim, you have to put it back in the mikvah. What if a woman who's a Nida touches it? And what if a Sharetz touches it? Does this really mean that it's a din of Tama? Va'id, let's read the words of Ramesha. He says, why? The opposite. We would all think. Now we would all think, if you don't know anything, you think, a guy for sure is Tommy. No, a guy is not Tommy. There's no din of Tommy on a guy, Misham Davar. And we know even further. Are you allowed to use it? We all know, which we're eventually going to get to, is if you borrow that keli from the guy, you're allowed to use it. What do you mean? It's Tommy. Says Ramesha. He says Ramesha and Vaid. He is another ayah. Then what about Kli Chares? What about other items? We know Kli Chares is the worst thing in the world of Tama. Once it becomes Tama, you can't even make it tar. You have to break it. So Kli Chares, you don't have to taivel. What's going on over here? It's Tama. It came from the guy. Says Ramesha, Aval Kairi Zeb Bishma de Alma. Though what does it mean that it's Tama that's going out of the Kedusha, the Tomas Nachri, Minachnasa like Kedusha Israel? It's considered a shame the Alma like Li'akim Shiv Tameim the Tashmishe Achila di Yisrael Kedoshim. And it sounds almost like a Chassidish of art, but the Ramesh is explaining the Yerushalmi, and this is the halacha, and this is really the whole background of Tevilas Keilim, is that when something, and this explains as well why it's only when you purchase it, it's not a problem necessarily in using the item one time, taking that fork from that spoon from the guy and eating a bowl of cereal. Okay, we use cereal because it's cold, and you're only doing it one time because you're allowed to do it at Bakrai. If you understood what we just said, wonderful. If not, please do not apply it la halacha. And I just confused myself. Therefore, thank you. That's always therefore what? Thank you very much. Says Ramesha, so it's just coming out of the Tama and entering into the Achila of Yisrael Kedeshim. Excellent. And I just want to read you a line of the Darkei Tshuva. Just a fascinating line. He's quoting Knesset Gedalah. And he says, Afal gav de koinim shekanoi min ha'akom. Again, Afal gav shekanoi min ha'akom mutter mishura sadin l'shtamshe, because you didn't buy it from him. But late tefillah mikomak, he says, mechua adavar. Shem da oisei tashvish inu bikdusha. Meaning he takes this all the way. Okay, la'alacha, we know this is not true, but he takes this all the way. The keli is echi. How can he use it? And therefore he says you kli b'shutfis. And okay, let's keep this to the halacha. Okay, so halacha lamaisa is that it takes it out of the guy and it brings it into a yid. So now, what items need a tevilah? We know the 6 items listed in the Torah, which are zahav, gold, kesef, silver, necheshes, copper, barzel, iron, bedil, which is tin, and oiferes or avar, which is lead. What does not need tevilah? Everything else. What is explicit in the Paiskim? Very simply, the Rambam lists 8: wood, that's your challah board, not with the glass cover. Even, stone, that is not much. What's made out of stone? Yeah, but it all has glazing on top, which we have to get to. And klei adam, earthenware. So now we come to the shaila of glass. They're all glazed. Kemat, you should know. Kemat, everything nowadays is going to be glazed. Why is it going to be glazed? The reason it's going to be glazed is because if it's not glazed, it gets soaked into the item, and it's not so. That's usually.
That's the point.
You want it to get root?
No, it's not glazed. It's a you have to season it before you get it.
If you have to season it, then the oils go into it. Right. So then.
They got the flavor of the stone.
Which no. Okay, you have other issues with that, which you're not getting. There are kashrus issues. I will mention they make pizza stones, and they make other type of stone items. I can't remember right now what they are. Which people they make pots and things that are also quote unquote seasoned. Seasoned pots you have to be very careful with. The world of kashrus, just an FYI, because they're seasoned with oils, and the question is if those oils are kosher. So just something to keep in mind. It happens to be, ironically, one of the famous ones. I don't remember what it is right now. I just remember I looked into it one time and it wasn't a problem. Why I don't recall. Okay, let's move on. Zchuchas, glass. Says the Gemara of the Zar Davayin Hey Ravashi. Hani klei zchuchas al v'chinishbru yesh lam takana. Since if you break it, you can fix it. Kikeli matachis dami. Therefore, it is like kli matachis. Because it has the same properties as metal. And therefore has a chiyuv tefillah. Is it a daraisa? Is it a din derabanan? Again, Kemat, everyone says this is a din derabanan. In as much as one could have wondered why. Why is this more of a derabanan than that? I know, because it's learned from the pasuk, but metal's also learned from the pasuk. So that really goes back to the Aruch HaShulchan. And I guess one's one more step removed. I don't really know. But Lamaisa, Kol HaPaiskim speak out over here that it's going to be a din derabana. There's a Maimer Mordechai apparently in Hilchos Shabbos that says maybe it's a deraisa. But Lamaisa, it's derabanan. It's a derabanan. Do you need a brachos? This is where a big mistake comes in. Is that many people know one dot and they know that glass is not explicit, but you need to tevel it. So in a feeble mind, I don't mean I don't mean that in a not nice way. I just mean feeble in knowledge. You don't necessarily know. So one thinks that it's not explicit. It's a chiddush. Okay, so you Tevilah, you don't make a bracha. Lamaisa kol paiskim kol rishayim kol, every single one speaks out that you need to make a bracha. The only time you get involved in not making a bracha is going to be when you get involved in the world of sveikis, when you get involved in the world of sveikis, and when you get involved in some new materials. So, but again, simple glass kelim, you make a bracha. And again, of course, there, as in all worlds of halacha, what do you mean? I bought an Eretz Yisrael and the Rav told me not to make a bracha. Not because of the item, that's because of the bailas. If you have a suffix on the bailas of the ownership, if it's made by Yid, v'chulu. But the glass item in its very nature needs tefillin. Now, pshute kli zchuches. What are pshute? That just means pieces of glass. That might be a different story, which we're not going to get involved in right now. Let's just list what are all the types of glass out there. So you have crystal, which is, again, now we're getting past the world of Shulchan Aruch, and this is in the world of the Paiskim. Crystal, you need to make a bracha. Corel is a little bit of an interesting shayla. Corel seemingly is glass, it's fused, and many Paiskim write, you need to make a bracha. Lamaisa, they quote Rav Moshe as saying, you don't make a bracha in Besaris Moshe, but I can't say I fully understand. It has something to do with the process that it's made from. It's something because I don't know. It's like a fashioned glass. It's made like Corel doesn't break. Whatever. I don't fully understand. Lemaisa, there are paiskim that want to say that Corel you won't make a bracha on. Lemaisa, I believe the parting line is that pashtas is you make a bracha, it's regular glass. Pyrex is the same thing. The pashtas is you're going to make a bracha. Duralex, which again is another type of glass, Lex type of item, you make a bracha. Corningware, what? What are these items? I have no clue, but when you look at the bottom of the item and it says these things, this is what you know. The Art Scroll book on Corningware for some reason says not to make a bracha. Again, I don't fully understand what I'm talking about. So let's move on. Plastic. I'm not going to go into plastic right now. I'm just going to be ma'ir the shayla. What's the shayla on plastic? It's $1 million shayla. Maybe we'll come back to this at the end. $1 million shayla is, the Gemara just said that why does glass need to be tevilah? Because it has the same properties as metal, so plastic has the exact same property. Plastic is, by its very nature, what does it do? It could be melted down and it could be put back together.
Every metal should be the same shayla.
What do you mean? Every metal?
It's not one of those metals.
Aluminum. We're about to get to aluminum in 1 second. No, the only other metal that is going to be aluminum, apparently. You're saying titanium. Saying iPhone 15, I hear. But we'll get there. We'll get there, titanium. But you like that one. That was for you. That was for you. Lemaisa, the Minchas Yitzchak, you should know, Lemaisa says plastic, you have to tevilah. Again, I want to come back to plastic. It says you tevilah that a bracha. And let's leave it at that. Let's go into aluminum. As you asked. Let's go into aluminum because I really want to get into disposable Keilim. That's really what I'd like to get into. So aluminum. What is the halacha with aluminum? So what would everyone here assume? What's halacha with aluminum? What would you assume?
Yeah.
Why not?
You assume. Why not? Give me 2 reasons.
It's like glass.
A, it's not worse than glass, and B, it's metal. Shkoyach. The Torah listed the 6 metals one would think that they had, but is going to be any worse than that. So you could ask whatever you like. We don't discriminate. Try not to.
Side in the world that one of the things listed in the Torah were aluminum, we're translating it wrong.
We know what those 6 are.
I mean, zahav is zahav.
Right, so I'm asking,
Maybe bedil, maybe tin.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, it doesn't seem. You're asking an interesting question. If there was someone that wanted to say maybe that, then perhaps. Lamaisa, no one. I haven't seen anyone that wants to.
They had those 6 metals in those times.
No. He's just saying maybe it's a name game. I hear the thought. I'm not.
Moshe speaks to that. I know that
Well,
in those
you say
times,
that-
Hashem wrote the Torah. Hashem knew all metals.
Right.
So why didn't it say aluminum?
That's the tzad, that's the type of tzad.
So I don't understand which way you're saying. I'm sorry.
No, No, I'm saying you just asked, what do you think about aluminum? So everyone just said that we need Tevilah. I'm saying maybe not. Maybe what do we need Tevilah? The Torah doesn't say it. The Torah knows, Shem knew all the metals in the belt, and he only said these 6. Right.
No.
So Rashi say something like this?
Yeah, of course. No, that wasn't what he just said.
No,
He's asking a new sad. I'm agreeing to what you're saying.
Something else. Rav is saying, in response to the obvious question of, would you assume that aluminum is chayav tefillah? He's saying, no, I don't assume so. I believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows all the metals, and that's done.
Okay, very good. I'm not sure. You guys figured out yourselves issues. Let's continue. Lamaisa, what is the status? Givaldik. Good. Everything's good? Perfect. So what is the story with aluminum? Comes along, the earliest source is the Tevilas Yisrael, that he says that Lamaisa, everything is included in the Deraisa. Doesn't mean exclusively 6. These were the 6. And therefore, let's just read his words. Zelav Dafka. The Rebbitim alalu matzu ativim kama mine matachas chadashim. Shlosh arim avosayim that our avosayim, our forefathers did not have. V'gam sheish laim ershem kulam bechlal elu havam minu shezachar agoyin zatzal akopanim svirlei sheish shemo yishal matachas analin lav dafka alakol hanirka bepatish rakua pachim nikra matachas. Everything is called a metal, and therefore it says it's Tevilas Yisrael. Quotes the Shevet HaLevi that it's a good old-fashioned chiyuv, and it's a chiyuv d'oraisa, straight up from the Torah. The Chachani says similarly, and I guess that would be, I don't want to say the easier way of learning, but that would just be the easier way of learning. That it includes everything. There's an Aruch HaShulchan as well, and the Aruch HaShulchan in Sif Chav Gimel says kol kli me'iza min matacha shu tzarech Tevilah. Ach lo kol kli matachas tzarech Tevilah. Okay, it needs Tevilah. Now, no, he's just going weiter in whether it's a kli achil or not. He's agreeing that it's a chiyuv. The question is if he's holding it's a deraisa or it's a look at Sif Chav Gimel. Look at Sif Chav Gimel. I didn't mean to open the can of worms. Look at Sif Chav Gimel. You should follow your script and not decide on a whim what to say. Look at Sif Chav Gimel. Good. We'll leave it at okay. Let's leave that. Good. Next.
What's China?
We're in the middle of aluminum. What is China?
Yeah.
China is cheres that's coated with glass. China is cheres.
It's made out of bone china, that's what it means?
China, that means it's made out of cheres or bone, but it's made out of something that's not chayiv in tefillah, and then they're coated with glass, and that's going to be everything. All coatings on Keilim are glass, but Lamaisa it's a very very thin coating, and we already saw from Rav Kiva Eger that he already was ma'ir that if something's only a glizer to glazing, he wanted to say that's not the sugya in Shulchan Aruch. We just jumped and we just went straight into left field. I'm not sure why, but we could go there for a quick moment. Is that Shulchan Aruch discusses something coated from the inside, something coated from the outside. Only the inside, only the outside. It's there for sturdiness, it's there for eating, blah blah blah. Both sides. Chayav Tevilah, Givaldik. If it's the right qualifications, comes like Rav Kiva Eger on the page, and he says, "Well, he says, but if just a glaze, then it's not going to be a deraisa. It's going to drop it down a level." Based off of that, come along the place, and I'm saying maybe if it's even less than that, it won't even have a chayav Tevilah. Okay, I would. You want to go all the way? Okay, so the halacha would be something like china, something like a mug. All these items would be a tefillah without a bracha, but it is important to know that it's pashtus a chumrah. Pashtus a chumrah. Pashtus not meikar adin, and therefore b'makam atzayrech there is a makam to be meikar on these items. China, it's actually interesting. I really don't know why we just went here. Okay, let's shoot. Okay, we'll come. What time is it? Okay. I just want to give you the Mar Mekaimis. Kiveger says on the Shachs V'Gad Dalet, Davka Mesubim Ba'avar Mamish Aval Glazer to Lo Yavarich. Says Glazer to Lo Yavarich. Aruch HaShulchan comes along in Sif Chav Tes, and he says Ve'elu Vades Yichatil Dechiv B'Zchukas Avi Ketzibur Me'atachas V'Isi Keilim Keilu. He says you can have a Chiyav Tefillah. The question is, what is this glazer that they're talking about? And Chalkus B'Nyamin wants to say it's the same thing that we have right now. It's a very, very thin. It's a very thin coating. Lamaisa comes along. We'll just go all the way to that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fine. Good. Yes. Good. Okay, well, let's go back to aluminum for 1 second. Comes along the Emes Liakov. Emes Liakov has an incredible tshuva over here in Siman Kuf Chav Sef Aleph. And he says he looked at Tevilas Yisrael and he has his kashas and his issues, and he has an incredible arichos. And Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky wants to include that really you don't have to tevel aluminum. Really don't have to tevel aluminum. And the reason is because it's not included. It's only those 6, and therefore this is not those 6, therefore it's going to be pater. And you shouldn't require tefillah at all. He ends off and he says, well, what about glass? And he says, l'chayra ulamaisa yesh lehisnahig. It's important to hear the way he's saying it. Litvol b'li bracha. There's a cheshav ha'efoy dain padua that says, no. Again, aluminum, he says, is the same. It shall be included just like glass, but he says to be tevel without a bracha. So you're asking if it's like glass, tevel with a bracha. That's what Ramesha really says. The simple way of understanding, there's a Ramesha in Yardei Gimel Simchav Beis, and Ramesha says that Lamaisa aluminum is going to have tefillah derabanan, kamo kli zchuches, end of tshuva. So when you learn Ramesha, what do you assume? It's like kli zchuches, and what? You make a bracha. And that's how Lamaisa, most Svarim quote Ramesha. Again, just to be fair, in the Mesiris Moshe, they want to say you don't make a bracha. Why? Because the Svara Gedaila that it's only the 6 in the Torah, which the question to that is, Ramesha said that, and then he continued and he said it's like glass. So maybe it's similar to Rav Yaakov. Maybe that's how this Mesiris Moshe is understanding Ramesha, similar to Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, that he had a similar binyan, and he ended off no bracha, which you could ask on Rav Yaakov the same kasha. Why no bracha? Glass you make a bracha on, and I'll be honest, I don't fully know the answer to that question.
Well, with glass, there's a Gemara that's
Oh, good. Salamai is one step lower. You're saying even if you're going to say it's going to be a chiddush, we're not going to go so far to me. Okay, ein achanam. Again, everyone understands what Ramesh is saying. He's saying very good. He's saying we could say it's like glass, but you can't say it's mamish glass. And I concur. And there's some Zalmin Lamaisa says, do not make a bracha on aluminum kelim. He says, fine, don't make a bracha. Now, what is the halacha on aluminum kelim? So it's very interesting because aluminum, many things are made of aluminum nowadays. Not disposables. As opposed to stainless steel. You buy something, some things say stainless steel, so you say aluminum. Very, very common. So what's the story? One would think that you make a bracha like Ramesha, like the Shevet Levi and the Chutshani. And the Chuvas and Haggis says the same thing. What's interesting is it seems, whether this is because of Rav Zalman, who has a tshuva written to Rabbi Forst in the Art School book, whether that's what happened. If you open the Art School Siddur, again, as Dailam here pointed out, the Art School Siddur doesn't weigh in on every halacha. Over here, in the bracha of Tevilas Keilim, it says, except for aluminum. Pretty strong line. Again, it would seem that's the halacha. It seems that if one wants to know, do you make a bracha on aluminum? It seems that the accepted minhag is going to be like that, like Rosh Zalman, that and Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, that you don't make a bracha on aluminum. It's just interesting to note that, again, you have to do a little bit of a history, which we didn't finish the history over here. The tshuva of Ramesha was seemingly written the same time that Rosh Zalman wrote to Rabbi Forst. So why that one? He just punked asked Rosh Zalman. What if he asked Ramesha the same shayla? And Ramesha wrote back, you make a bracha, the whole world would have changed. It's a little bit difficult. Or maybe we say this is one of those cases that you have a Safek HaShakal, you have Ramesha versus Rosh Zalman, and you don't make a bracha. L'chayra, if one only has an aluminum keli, he would not make a bracha. Now, why is this so incredibly important, aside from the fact that it's incredibly important, is because let's go to disposable kelim. Now, disposable kelim is the biggest topic. There's two big topics in Tevilas Keilim. What are the two big topics? Disposable kelim and electronic kelim. These are the $2 million topics because everything else is going to be simple-ish. Obviously, we're going to have a million shilas, but it's going to be simple-ish. But disposable kelim is going to be, it could be a world war right now. before we go into the world of the Paiskim, let's just, something's brewing. Let's just, I don't know, the cupboard. It smells good. Let's just speak out what we would think. Again, before we open the world of the Paiskim, you come home, you're learning Tevilas Keilim, and your wife takes an aluminum pan, disposable aluminum pan. So you take the aluminum pan, and you say to yourself, it's made out of aluminum, it's a pan. I think we would all assume it's chayiv in Tevilah. If you were to have a discussion, you would say to someone, yeah, it's chayiv in Tevilah. Say, but it's disposable. Would anyone care? Again, before we get to the world of the Paiskim discussing this, why would disposable make a difference? It's a kli. Finish. Now, the reason why this is very difficult, and the reason why this sugya is about to get extremely difficult, is because what makes something a kli? There's many different areas of halacha to figure out what's something called a kli. You could go into Tumah V'Taira. That's your first turn. And you say, is it a kli in Tumah V'Taira? As we're going to get there in one moment. Or you could just go into general kelim. So let's try to go in order. And hopefully come out with some clarity. To start is in the very beginning of the siman, you see that Tumah V'Taira comes right in the first Pischei Tshuva. It says these big kelim gedolim. You have a Shev Yaakov and a Gedulei Taira. We have a fundamental machlek as Shev Yaakov versus Gedulei Taira. Gedulei Taira. As to whether we base the halachos of Tevilas Keilim on Tumah V'Taira. The Shev Yaakov says yes. And according to the Shev Yaakov, the world would be drastically different. Because if everything went with Tumah V'Taira, you would say, is this something that is Mekabel Tumah or not? And if for whatever which reason in the world of Tumah V'Taira it wouldn't be, the halacha would be, it is Pater. That is what would happen. And for whatever which reason it's not Kli, which we've seen in other areas of halacha, right? We've seen in Hilchos Nido, it's like Mekabel Tumah. We go into the world of Tumah V'Taira. That's how the Shev Yaakov learns. The Gedulei Taira argues violently. The Minchas Yitzchak, in two different shuvas, really is who we're going to use this as the beginning of the springboard. Yes, I know that we're not starting with Ramesh that everyone wants me to start with, but we'll get to him in a moment. The Minchas Yitzchak begins and says, we have this machlekes. The Gedulei Taira comes along, and he says, it's not true. It's not true. It has nothing to do with Tumah V'Taira. Period. Based off of that simple machlekes, if I were now to tell you, wait, in the world of a keli, something disposable, something that's thrown out, doesn't have a din of a kli, you would say, who cares? Because that is in the world of Tumah V'Taira. That's the Shev Yaakov. The Gedulei Taira argues, and it seems from the Pischei Tshuvas that we've all seen, it seems from the Shulchan Aruch, what's the Psak Halacha? It seems the Psak Halacha is like the Gedulei Taira. As we're not busy saying that, just because something is Mechuber L'Karka, it's going to be Pater and Tevilah. Maybe there will come a point, it will become not a Klei Achila, which we're going to have to get to, that'll probably be the next year. But as the Pischei Tshuva and the Aruch HaShulchan, everyone speaks out, if I have a Kli that's Talosh, L'Usoiv Chebroi, it's not going to make it Pater from Tevilah. However, comes along the Minchas Yitzchak with two reasons why, even though the Gedulei Taira says we do not look at the rules of Tumah V'Taira, a disposable kli will still be pater. Says the Minchas Yitzchak two different reasons. Reason number one, terufa gam l'shelasenu. We have some medicine to our sheila. Shekasef. The Efsher lefisha aimrim ha'omnim. The omnim say, shemashim, he's talking about those yeres gedolos, those big pots, that if you put the yesh, the scotch, in those big bekelim elu, hu mitkalkel. If you leave it inside these big pots, it would not work. In Cain, la lo yahachi klei tashmish. Minchas Yitzchak here says a beautiful chiddush. Not that it's not a kli, it's a kli. Because we don't look at Tumah V'Taira. And therefore, since we don't look at Tumah V'Taira, it's not a kli. But it's not a kli tashmish. What do you mean? Why are you telling me because something can't be used for a prolonged period of time doesn't get a din of kli tashmish? Who cares? Even if something is only used once, we know you have a chiv tefillah. Says the Minchas Yitzchak, Hainu hecha deroi al kol panim letashmish keva, aval hacha einoi roi letashmish boy keva. And because it's not roi for tashmish boy keva, therefore says the Minchas Yitzchak, disposable pans are parts from tefillah. And he continues, and he says it's even more so. Not only do you not keep stuff in an aluminum disposable pan for a long time, you only use it one time. Says the Minchas Yitzchak. Lamaisa, the Mishnah Halachos was very, very upset, and he quotes this tshuva, and he starts arguing violently, and he says, what are you talking about? It could be used for a long time, and for more than one time, therefore it should be called a kli, and it should be called a kli tashmish, and therefore it should have a chiv in tefillah. But that's reason number one is going to be that the Minchas Yitzchak wants to tell you that even the Gedulei Torah would be maskim in this case. There's no chiv tefillah. The Minchas Yitzchak now has a second reason. And with this second reason, what's going to be beautiful is this is going to create that split that we've all been trying to create between Tevilas Keilim and other areas of halacha. Meaning, we've all spoken out and mentioned that what do you mean? We have the Ramesh's tshuva about the washing cup and about the kiddush. Is it called a kli? Is it not called a kli? Is it the same thing? Is it not the same thing? On what do you mean? We all know that Ramesh says for kiddush you need a kais. No. For washing you need a kli. So we're going to make levels. Is that a paper cup, l'chayra, that falls apart in your hands like the airline cups, won't even be able to use for Netilas Yadayim? A regular plastic cup will be able to use for Netilas Yadayim. Could a regular plastic cup be used for a kiddush? The answer is it could be used, but you don't get the mile of a kais, hagen of a kais. No. But now if you go and you buy from the store, the disposable hard plastic cup, could you use that for kiddush? So we would say, yeah, it's a kais. No. But comes along, everyone says 1 second, but you're going to throw it out. Is the fact you're going to throw it out make it not a kli like we're saying over here? If it makes not a kli, then how can you make kiddush on it? Comes along the Minchas Yitzchak, and he says, absolutely beautiful. He says as follows. He says, again, he uses the words that he wants to claim it's not a kli tashmish. But here he seemingly says, why is it not a kli tashmish? He says, because you don't intend to use it for a long time. He says it's not roya, and he goes on weiter and he says that the reason over here is, it's a lengthy tshuva. If you want to know, this is Minchas Yitzchak in Chiluk Ches Simin Samach Tes. He says as follows, let me just find the right line. He says, sorry, I can't find the line. I hope I'm right in my quote. Yeah, it comes from a Rambam. Again, a Rambam that says using a keren for to use it. And the Rambam says the keren shu mishta, Rambam's in Hilchos Keilim, Parakei Lachazayin. Keren shu mishtamish ba mashlicha ina mekabeles toma. So he wants to say that it's going to be similar over here. What's the reason? The reason is because you plan on throwing it out. So now he's learning, and this is where the world of Tevilas Keilim, says the Minchas Yitzchak, is different than all other areas of halacha. He says the fact that you plan on throwing it out, and it's an item that is made to throw out, I don't care if it's a strong item, and I don't care if it's able to stand for a long time. The fact that it's made to throw out and you're going to throw it out, says the Minchas Yitzchak, it doesn't get the shame kli tashmish, and therefore that's reason number 2, says the Minchas Yitzchak, it is pater from tefillah. But on that as well, the Mishnah Halachos wants to argue. So far we have 2 reasons, but both reasons don't seem to be that great. Ramosha Feinstein in the Tshuva, which you've all saw, says also it's pater. And many want to say, disposable pans, Tevilah from Ramosha. And people here said, learn the Tshuva. It's not true. Just like we say, when someone gives you that plastic cup for kiddush, do you use it for kiddush? You say, yeah. And you say, what's my marmakim? My marmakim is Ramosha. He says, what do you mean? Ramosha has a whole tshuva that you can use a plastic cup for kiddush. You said you learned the tshuva wrong. Moshe doesn't have a plastic cup you can't use for kiddush. Moshe says if you have a cup that's going to fall apart in your hands, you can't use it for kiddush. But our plastic cups, of course, they won't fall apart if you can use it for kiddush. Similarly, the Eilam wants to tell you that Ramosha says very simply in the tshuva over here, not the way. Then what does Ramosha say? The Ramosha says that if you're doich kinatz when mishtam from beis or gimel pamim, then maybe that's What do you mean doichin? It's not a doichik to use it 2-3 times. This thing can last for as long as you want. And therefore, it will be debatable whether you could have Ramesha. Others would obviously taina that no. Lamaisa, whether it's because it gets disgusting, whether it's because it's made that way, that it's not. Is the paper? Can I have that paper from the printer? That's the next part of the shir. It's Rebelsky. Comes along Rebelsky, Baruch Hashem, and by the way, we also maybe I should have been mocked him. We have to realize this for sure. When the whole world does something, it means something. Even though I would be remiss if I mentioned that the Minchas Yitzchak is very busy. V'cheima amadavar. This is the minhag, and the Mishnah Halachas, as he argues on him, Rav Menashe Klein is very busy saying, You created it. What do you mean, v'chein amadavar? This is the shayla, and you're telling people to do it. So he screams back. Thankfully, just the shirt. He screams back, and he says, that what do you mean that? Umasha kosav shcheina madavar lo hevi noisi to keep you davar chadash va'achshav shayelin alav. They're asking now. They're asking you what to do. Mayam davar ika hachlis v'echlam ube'emes kizeh shanim rabbi shani na'agasi b'siyata d'shmaya poi eitel hashemim li litvo. So Menashe Klein says there's no minhag, and I've been titling them. But so we know that it's not really the Metzias nowadays. So maybe you could say that Minchas Yitzchak won. But Rebelsky comes along, and we're going to basically, this will sort of wrap us up. Rebelsky comes along, and he says, does a pot for fish, one-time usage, need Tevilah? And yes, this was written with Rebelsky's own pen, and there's no pick book whether he wrote it, he published it in his lifetime, and all good things. Says Rebelsky, tshuva, yesh lahakal b'sirum ubimachbatot, which is pants, me'olumina in, I said that like a clown, ham yuda'it, oh my gosh, the words are not working, l'shimash chad b'ami, disposable things we make, shaloi lahatzek l'tevim, v'hamachmer l'tevim mikom makom, don't make a bracha. That's his answer. And then he goes on and explains, and he says, what's the reason? He says, Maron Ramesha Feinstein Savar, that these one-time usage bands inan tzvichan tefillah because they're made l'shimash echad ulazarkam v'einay chashav kli. Now, Rebelsky learned the tshuva Ramesha, so he's telling you how he learned the tshuva. Now, I'm not saying that I learned the tshuva that way. I'm not saying you learned the tshuva that way. This is how Rebelsky learned the tshuva, and Rebelsky was not afraid to take apart a tshuva Ramesha and to question details of Chuvas Ramesha, and that's where the whole America is eating potato chips, because Rebelsky argued on Ramesha's Chuva of potato chips. Because Rav David went to Ramesha with a potato chip, and Ramesha said it's Bishal Akum because it's a potato. And Rebelsky's whole Chuva is that he went to Rav David, and he asked Rav David, what was the story? Because you have this Ramesha has this teeny little Chuva about this thing called a potato chip. What was the story? I want to know, what did you bring him? Meaning, potato chip, maybe you brought him a French fry. What exactly did you bring him? Is it a snack? And Rav David said he doesn't remember the story. And Rebelsky writes, Rav David didn't remember the story, and then from there he goes to argue, and he says that, and it's based on other tshuvas of Ramesha in the world of Bishul Akum with factories, v'chulu, and therefore Rebelsky says that you don't need to have Bishul Yisrael for potato chips, and there comes hairs and all the world's OU potato chips that many, if not most, eat. Why? Because Rebelsky. So he's not afraid to argue in what Ramesha says. But here, says Rebelsky, learning of Ramesha, our tshuva Gimel, Chav Gimel, that one-time pans, you don't need tefillah. Why? Because they're made to use one time and throw it out in chashav kli. Why? Because what is a kli? Ki kli hu davar shem sham shem pam acher pam. Me'edach yesh machavet chad pamit loif hoidu. Sounds like a town for a chicken. Shel marot shehi miuyadet kiviyach l'shim shchad pami. Aval pamim hi benuya b'miuchad. Ooh, 1 second, says Rebelsky. But it's built good. And it's heavy. And it's not so cheap. And no one used it one time. It's difficult. He says, I don't understand. If you throw it out, fine. If you don't throw it out, then not fine. So what do we do? So it comes along Rebelsky, and he says, Me'idach yesh losis leif. She'im adavar nasa miulamnim tahar. It's made from aluminum. Yish kamat stadim litzarif lakel. Nisha Soif Kal Soif, aluminum, Einay Min Sheish Minim Atachos Amizkarim Batayra. The Pasuk in Bamidbar says, Achazav is a kefis, the Rosh Vizabars was of Dovas Hares, Varihim Kemoi, Shisha Kesuvim Be'echad, as Ramosha himself writes in two Chuvas. Imkein, Eichav Shaladamoi says, Matachos Amisuyin Kiyom, Shamadum Loi, Beshimish Bezan Shalapaiskim, Vein Af Echad Shaimer Sheim B'chuyam Betvila. Ugedayla mizu aluminum hu afilu yoser rachik michiyat tefila sharei hayo gedayli apaiskim kamai Rav Chaim Brisk v'achirim shay b'shayta shesaver aluminum ino nechshel matachet klal. As we quoted, this is the Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, the what he was quoting. El nechshav adama, just earth. V'adav yadua l'chol hayodim b'chachma hakimiya. Whoever knows, and no one was a greater scientist than Rabbi Belsky. Aluminum ein et hatchonit shel matachis. Doesn't have the same chemical properties. Similar to ground. We type aluminum pots. Godless Rebelsky. We type them. You make a brach with no suffix. In our case, again. And he's talking to a chicken pan that's strong and that it's sturdy and it could be reused, and no one would only use it once. Hagoyin Hagadol Rabbi Belsky. How does Rabbi Belsky do that? This is why Rabbi Belsky was Hagoyin Hagadol. So now, no properties. Again, because of glass. It's all glass, and then whatnot. Which obviously every disposable pan also has the properties of glass. It's the same thing. Lamaisa comes along Rabbi Belsky and says you don't have to table them. Comes along the Chuvas Hanagais and he says it's not called Kli Tashmish Suda. Why? Because you're going to throw it out after one usage. And he wants to go so far and says, but when you use it the second time, now he's saying now it's not so simple. Because he's saying that's not what it is. So he starts to give us a little bit of a middle ground. And but he says, but if it's made out of aluminum, then it's only made to use one time, therefore you could be makel. So in summation, we have about 4 reasons, or 5, that you don't have to taival these pans. Let's start backwards. This is how going to Gadol Rabbi Stillerman quantifies it, and I think it makes it very easy to understand. Number 1, it's not made out of metal, it's made out of aluminum. Number 2 is that it's not Kli Tashmish, and it's not Kli Tashmish. That's number 2 and number 3. Those are the 2 reasons of the Minchas Yitzchak. I skipped backwards. You have Rav Moshe. The Rav Moshe is not a Kli, because it's going to be thrown out. And then you have Rav Moshe Sternbach, the Chuvas Vanagos, that says it's not Kli Suda. So that's many Paiskim. Lamaisa, who's on the flip side, the Cheshav Ephod on the flip side, comes along and says, what are you talking about? It's made to be used many times, and therefore you taival it. The Ber Moshe, the Debertina Rav comes along, and he says you taival it. The Mishnah Halachas, as we quote it, comes along, says you taival it. The Chadshani says you have to taival it. And Nemensal answers that if you're going to use it more than one time, you have to taival it. And that is the end of the story. So now, let's give an eitzah, which might not be practical, and then let's give a lach l'maisa. The eitzah, which might not be practical, comes from Rav Chatzkel Roth, the Emek HaTshuva. He says, I'll tell you what you should do. You're in the middle of learning this of Uman Koine B'Shvat Kli and rebuilding an item. He says, no, you do. You take your pan, you crush it, and you rebuild it. Nasli de Yisrael. Azam Maifis. He says, you're going to tell me it's so simple? He says, that doesn't bother halacha. Go learn Bishul Akum, he says. He said, the road to Bishul Akum, the guy takes a whole thing, lights a fire, puts it on the thing. How do you make a Bishul Yisrael? You take your spoon, you stir it, it's Bishul Yisrael. Why? Because there's some involvement of it. Or you pick it up, you put it back down, or you just change the flame a little bit. What do you mean? Because now you did something.
Here you have to change the shape.
Oh, okay. I understand what the shayla would be here. You need to be nasi. So this is his raya. It's just a dimion. I don't believe it's like a real raya. I'm asking to what you're saying. But he says you could do it. He says you could crush the pan and you could rebuild it. I'll mention who says this? The Emek HaTshuva, Rav Chatzkel Roth. Rav Yashiv seemingly was maskim to this eitzah. He says to lift, to destroy it and to rebuild it. I will mention the Pasha says it needs to really be destroyed. Meaning, even within this eitzah, it doesn't just mean to fold it a little bit. It means to flatten it. So, which makes it a little bit better. It doesn't mean just like, it means to make it ice clean, flatten it, and to rebuild it. That's what they say. I agree with you. The Chachani argues, and Rav Nevitzal argues, and the Cheshav Eifod argues, and they all say that Lamaisa, that doesn't help. So whatever, yeah, I guess so. Whatever, that's the Chiddush, obviously. Very good. So the Halach Lamaisa is, Baruch Hashem, this shayla has been minimized greatly. Why? Because they make many Keilim, many disposable Keilim, I think almost the same price, that have Hechsherim. Let's just talk about the American ones. Some want to tie in Eretz Yisrael. The Hechsher is not whatever. I don't want to weigh in because I don't know anything, but I just, from what I've been told, there is no difference. But Lamaisa, if it has Hechsher, that means it's Nasli de Yisrael, and everything's good. You can get out of the old shayla. Number one. Number two is, if you're only going to use it one time, then l'chayra, it's a glata makam to mekel. A glata makam to mekel. It's very thick and this and that. L'maisa, that's like what Moshe Sternbuch wanted to tell you now, is that it's made to be thrown out. Now you want to know, the big shayla is, what if you plan on keeping it and you plan on using it? That's where it definitely gets not so pashit. And that's where, is there, yes, can one be mekel? Of course, as we're seeing, there is what to rely upon. But as you know, in the back of your mind, you have Ramesha screaming at you. The Ramesha says, what do you mean? You can't use it so many times. And as you use it so many times, Ramesha saying, see, it's a keli. Go bring it to the mikvah. So, l'chayr to use it many times is not so pashit. The eitzah that many think, which is by putting a piece of aluminum foil inside, we know is not an eitzah. It's not an eitzah. Maybe putting 2 pieces of foil is an eitzah. Because maybe if you line the pan with a piece of foil, that foil is bottled to the kli. And then if you put another piece of foil, not like all over, just like sitting in it, more like a shtickle basket matziv. Yeah, whatever. Maybe that would be a little bit better. And that's the halacha. If someone wants to be mekel and use it like levayed, I can't argue. I mean, you see Rebelsky seems to be quite adamant, but there's definitely a beautiful lechatchila, number one, to buy with a hechsher. Is a beautiful lechatchila to use it one time and not to use it loyal and vayed. And with this we'll end.